I'm happy to share some of the tools and resources we have today. There's a lot of tools and resources, so I just highlighted a few here. And I also have a few additional ones I can share today if there's time, and if not, I will share them in the part 2 of the legislation session that we're hoping to have either this month or in the near future. So yeah, if I could get the next slide, please. I'm gonna try one thing. If my camera might come back. Don't think it does, but that's okay. So basically, some of the resources and tools that we have are critical habitat mapping and data sharing agreements, field guides, some different online resources, and then some funding as well. So I'll just highlight a few of them and wanted to leave lots of time for questions and discussion. So next slide, please. So this slide talks to the critical habitat information. A lot of information is just on the Species at Risk Act public registry, and the link is there. So you can access information in recovery plans themselves. There's the IMAP, which Katrina went through. We also use that quite extensively and contribute to it. So we're using that data source as well and just like to promote it. The open data portal. So the Government of Canada has a data portal with all kinds of data. And it's on this data portal that we share shape files for the data that's publicly available. And then we have a data sharing agreement for the data that isn't publicly available. So sometimes there's different reasons why the data wouldn't be publicly available. So it could be that the data, the mapping is in development, so it's in draft, or it could be that the data is really sensitive, and we found in past that putting out data about certain species can actually do more harm than good. So we've set up federal data sharing agreements. We have 2 types of agreements. One is a very simple blanket one that doesn't even need signature, and there's another one that does need a signature. And essentially with that data sharing agreement, we have a form which basically asks, you know, who you are, the boundaries of the data that you want to receive. So usually people share things like their traditional territory boundaries or other boundaries that they use for their planning purposes. You provide that to us, and then we provide you with the shape files. And the agreement essentially says that that you'll use the data in conjunction with the recovery document, because the data is lines on the map, right? But what's really important when it comes to critical habitat is not just the lines on the map, but also the biophysical attributes. So we ask that people look at both the recovery document for those biophysical attributes with the shape files, and then of course, like with all data sharing agreements, that you don't share it more broadly. So that is essentially is what our data sharing agreements are about. I'll get that next slide. Another tool we have is a series of field guides. So these are available on the SARA website. Well, the geographically based guides are. So we have ones for different areas of the province. And basically what they include is a brief description and a photo of the species. And we've tried to write these in such a way that it's common language, and we're describing some of the more technical terms. We highlight some aspects of the habitat and the threats that this species is facing. So we have these guides, like I said, for geographical areas. We also have them based on different threat types. So we have in different sectors. So we have them for forestry, urban environments, and agriculture. So if those guides are of interest in addition to the geographic ones, you can let me know and I can send you PDF copies of those. And then, So these field guides basically are the federally listed species at risk, and we update them every couple of years when species status changes, and often more than less species are on the list. So these are the guides, and a useful tool, because when we do print them, we haven't this year because of COVID, but when we do print them, there's something small that people can take in the field with them as well. So we have a number of tools that the province of BC has. So they provided me this slide to share with you. So we talked about the iMap. We get to mention it 3 times. You can tell how much we use it and love it. So you get to see it 3 times here today and have the link. There's the list of species and ecosystems in BC. There's the conservation framework. So this looks at species and ecosystem outputs. There's Hectares BC. And I also put on here the Green Bylaws Toolkit. So the Green Bylaws Toolkit is a broad partnership. It's focused on BC laws, which is why I put it on this slide. Environment Canada leads on the development of this toolkit. So it includes everything related to environment, not just species at risk, but species at risk are a large component. So right now, the focus of this bylaws toolkit is local governments, and as we discussed earlier, Nalma and others talked about land code and various other tools. This Green Bylaws toolkit may be a resource for you. It also has case studies in it. And right now, we're doing a bit of a scoping exercise. The lawyer that put this together for us is doing a scoping exercise to see if it might be useful to develop a Green Bylaws toolkit for Indigenous governments, because we know there's other tools out there, and so we're just looking into whether this might be helpful. So that might be something, if anyone had any feedback on that, whether a bylaws toolkit would be useful, let me know. I'd love to hear that. So those are some of the BC resources online. I wanted to mention Environment and Climate Change Canada. We have a lot of different funding programs, and some of them will be quite familiar to people on the call. So I don't want to go into them for everyone, but those of you who haven't heard of these programs before or want to know more about them, I'm happy to talk to them as well. So of the funds, some of the main ones are the Aboriginal Fund for Species at Risk and Habitat Stewardship Program that's been around for a long time. We also have the Critical Habitat Inter-Departmental Program. So this is similar but somewhat different from the Inter-Departmental program that we previously had. And we also have, I know there's many First Nations and Métis involved in BC involved in agriculture. So I just wanted to highlight we also have a species at risk partnership on agricultural land. And then the ones I'll spend a bit more time on with are under this umbrella fund. So we have this umbrella fund called the Canada Nature Fund, and it has a number of programs under it. So the 2 I'm going to highlight are the ones in orange there on priority places and community nominated priority places. Also under this fund is the Indigenous Guardians program. I'm not going to go into that one because that one is led out of Ottawa nationally and doesn't have a regional lead on it, but I'm happy to put you in contact with that program as well if that's of interest. So go to the next slide. So with the 2 priority places and community nominated priority places, as probably many of you, all of you on the line today know that there's a lot of species at risk, a lot of federally listed species at risk. And so what we've done, of course, we're looking at and supporting projects related to all species, but we really wanted to highlight certain areas that have a huge concentration of species at risk and are facing a lot of pressures. And so across Canada, to start with, we've identified 11 places, and in BC, there's 2 areas we identified. And we also saw input from people outside of Environment Canada to select some priority hotspot areas, again, with high concentrations of species at risk and facing a lot of threats. And those ones are the community nominated priority places. So the goal of the priority places work is to develop and implement ecosystem-based conservation plans. For folks that have been involved in some of these other sessions, we've had some discussions about the challenges with the species by species approach, and that recovery plans work primarily looking at species by species. There are some multi-species plans, but primarily they're species by species. And so what this initiative does is it takes that more holistic approach that we all want to be taking, and that, you know, under the Species at Risk Act, we have the opportunity to take when we develop action plans, but we're in the really early stages, a lot of us, in developing those action plans. So these priority place initiatives help us focus building those holistic plans in these areas to start, and then we'll expand out from there. So through the priority places, oh, if you could just go back 1 second. Just wanted to mention that, so what we'll do is develop these holistic conservation plans, and the plans help identify priority actions, which then in turn help us fund those priority actions. So looking at things like stewardship, restoration, and very targeted education and outreach. So this is all about on the ground work and involvement of people in helping to protect and recover species. The map of the different priority places in BC. You can see in the green there, we're calling the Southwest priority place. The pink is the dry interior, and then the community ones are the what we're calling the Kootenay Connect and the Southern Rocky Mountain Trench. And so right now we're doing that holistic planning for these areas. It's in the really early stages. And even these areas geographically, in terms of number of species, are really huge as well. So we're starting, you can see the arrows pointing there. In the Southwest, we're starting on the island, and in the dry interior, we're starting in the Okanagan and Similkameen. So you can see kind of the areas that we're focusing on the next couple of years. And if you are in this area and you haven't heard of the priority places and you are interested in learning more and being involved, let me know. We did send some letters out, but I mean, everyone is so swamped more than normal these days. And so if you haven't heard it, there's still opportunity to get involved. We're early days. Next slide, please. Here's my contact information. If you want to get in contact with me about any of the data sharing, the tools, or the funding, you can contact me directly, and there's also information on the SARA website as well. I'll just see if there's any questions or comments on what I've gone over so far, and then I'll switch gears a little bit to talk about some other tools.